Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Guillaume calling from Volnay, Burgundy, France.
Oh, you speak English?
Yes, I can speak English.
זמן מצוין לעשות מיוט למיקרופון.
מישהו שם רואה טלוויזיה כרגע.
Hi Guillaume, we are just fixing one small problem that we don't hear you and are on in a few minutes.
I am here.
We can hear him.
With each other because we don't hear you yet, but
we hear him.
Went very fast, I hope.
But we hear him.
I can hear you, Daniel. Can you not hear me?
No, we can hear him. Maybe you can't, but we can.
Yeah, you can hear me. Now I can hear you. But soon I hope Dom Talel will fix it that we will hear everything. We can hear you now. We found the way to do that. And thank you very much, Guillaume, to be with us. It is wonderful and a very, very exciting moment for us. First of all, so first of all, I'm very happy because 2020 is going to be our 10th vintage together. And I really hope to see you here for some wonderful tasting in the near future. And I'm very happy that you offered us to make this Zoom tasting in our last visit. And here we are. And I will be very happy to let you speak and say everything. It's really huge honor for us to have you here with us on this Zoom tasting.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you everyone for joining this Zoom conference. I cannot see you, Daniel, but I'm hoping you can see me well. And I'm asking if everyone can turn off their sound so that there is no interference. That would be very helpful. I'm delighted to be with you tonight. Daniel reminded us that we have been working together for quite a number of years now. And I'm delighted that my wines have reached your country, which I have never visited, but I want to come and visit. My wife visited Jerusalem 2 years ago or 3 years ago and came back with twinkles in her eyes and said that I had missed something really unique. So it's my plan to come and visit, and we will sort this out with Daniel in the near future, hopefully when this pandemic situation is clarified and behind us. The purpose tonight is to talk a little bit about my estate in Volnay, about my family, and about the wines of 2018, which have reached now your market. You know, when Daniel first visited me 10 years ago or so, I think he knew not very much about my estate, but now he knows a lot more. It's an estate which has been in my family for more than 200 years. It was purchased by my ancestor in 1804, and it went on being run by a family member ever since. I am only the 6th generation running the estate, and I took over when my father passed away in 2003. So almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago now. He passed away very young, 75, and unexpectedly, very brutally. And so I had to quit my job, my prior job, because my father had asked me to do something else with my life before coming back to the estate. And so I went to business school, and I studied business, and I ended up working for an American bank for 25 years. And, you know, as the years went by, I came back to my father and I said, you know, I'm now ready to come back if you wish. And he would say to me, are you happy with your job? And I would say, yes. And he said, I'm healthy, so let's talk next year. And so we did that for a few years. And 1 year, of course, we did not have this conversation because he was, because he had I had followed my father's advice to do something else. I went, like I said, in the banking world for 25 years. But when I came back, So it was 2003. I went back to university. I went back to learn about winemaking for 1 year, part-time, but for 1 year. And I've been running the estate ever since, of course, with a great team around me, which is something I had learned in my prior life, to surround myself with competent people. And it's the case today that I have a great team, which helps me produce the best possible wines. Of course, we never reach perfection, nowhere near that, but we aim for perfection. And every year we try to do better than the prior year. In the circumstances, of course, because some vintages are more difficult than others, as you all know. So it is something that has been in my, in my guts for so long. You know, I lived here as a child. I went to boarding school, then business school, then doing other things in other countries. But I knew for good, always I knew that I was going to be back home at some point and run the estate. And so it was never a sacrifice. What the sacrifice was not to be able to overlap with my father for a few years. But, you know, as we say in French, c'est la vie, that's what it is. We cannot unwind what was done. So that was it. But, you know, what I meant to say is that it's a great privilege for me to be running this estate after 5 prior generations before me in the same family. And my grandfather and my father were quite important persons for Burgundy as a whole, especially perhaps my grandfather, but my father was also quite well known in the wine trade. And I was arriving there quite in a humble fashion because I had no prior experience, full-time on the job. So I learned, and I continue to be humble because making wine needs humility. Making wine is letting the terroir speak for you. You know, the only thing I'm doing is I'm helping the wine to be made by taking care of the vineyards during the year, picking the grapes at the right time. That's my decision. That's the most important decision of the year. And then making sure that the wine makes itself in the proper way during vinification and élevage. Overall today, the estate is about 15 hectares, actually 16 hectares in total, but of which at any point there is between 14 and 15 hectares producing, because we routinely uproot a portion of the estate. And it is an estate which is really focused on one single village, the village of Volnay, in the Côte de Beaune, just about 4 kilometers south of the city of Beaune. It's a beautiful hilly village. It sits in between two nice hills and it has a huge diversity of soils on that small village. It's a small village in terms of overall acreage of vineyards. To give you a sense of scale, the total cumulative acreage of Volnay Premier Cru is 110 hectares, and that's the size of Château Latour. Yeah, same size as one single property in Château Latour owned by one guy, whereas in Volnay, with the same size, we have about 40 different farmers farming this land. So we are talking about very small sizes, and therefore very little wine made, but unique, rare, but unique, and providing a unique pleasure also to drink.
Always such a stunning moment, you know, to hear that again and again. You know, when you're in Burgundy, you see that, but then when you see a lot of vineyard, but when the numbers are coming to your ears, it's almost impossible to believe it once after once, and you can understand why the demand of Burgundy is so huge, mostly when you have so many people do such a small area, not like one Chateau Latour for so many people, and so small producers, and you know, many K more, but you are already in seeing few generation of winemakers, even in Burgundy, coming from times where only 3-4 people in Volnay, coming now to many more. So it is very special that now there is much better wine from this 110 hectare that was not even before.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. The average quality of winemaking in Burgundy as a whole has improved quite significantly in one or two generations, let's say. So it's quite nice to see. Quite nice to see. So Daniel, I don't know. Do you want now to proceed with the tasting wines?
We can continue discuss, you know, about everything during the tastings, and we will do wine by wine to explain, you know, each different one. We don't do a comparison. It's the same vintage. It's a good time to understand all the full terroirs. As you said, such a diversity for the Volnay Premier Cru. So we will have almost the full diversity of the domain for the Premier Crus.
Yes, yes.
So we will start. We can sip the Volnay Premier Cru general.
Yeah.
Guillaume, you can speak about. I can say it's Pitour and Mitan, usually.
It's Pitour and Mitan. Yeah, it's Volnay Premier Cru is the only one in this range that we will taste tonight, which is a blend of two small parcels that we own. One is called Pitour and the other one is called Mitan. It's about 50-50 the two, but these are quite small parcels which do not justify having a separate label for each of them. So we blend them together and we call them Volnay Premier Cru without a name, of course, because we cannot give the two names at the same time.
That's an interesting point. You could do a Pitour Mitan with the blend.
Yeah, it would be weird. So, so we stick to Volnay Premier Cru. That's it. And sometimes, by the way, Daniel, one other reason is sometimes we also add young vines from other areas like Champagne or Taipei. So it's important for us to maintain that cuvée, which people know well now, and is also a nice entry point to understand the domain. Is drinkable earlier than the others also.
Do you see us as well in the Zoom?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. So we just put also the map, so everyone can really see that, and we can work with the map that the clients and everyone here will understand the area, the vineyard, and each terroir. So we will just share the screen on the map of the domain, if it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can see Piture is at the top hand corner, right hand corner there, and Mitan below. Yeah, that's Piture. That's very small piece. It's Piture, and then Mitan, yeah, the other way, the other side. Below. That's it. Yeah.
So actually, what was so special? It's the Clos des Angles next for the special that is going deep. Yeah. So the Piture and Mitan, the mix between the two, which each one what it gives you as in personally each terroir.
Yeah, you know, Piture, as you can see, is very close to Volnay-Clos-des-Ducs, which is right next to it. Piture is just to the north of Volnay-Clos-des-Ducs. It's a very white soil with lots of stone and a high content of limestone, whereas Mitan is more clay. It's lower on the hill, and it's more clay and ferrous oxides. So together, it's a nice mix. I think we can say that perhaps Piture will bring the minerality, the elegance, the lovely finish, and Mitan will bring the substance, the body of the wine.
That's showing the wine. The wine is very, very elegant, and the palate is, I think, is quite soft, and the tannins are still ripe, but of course they're in the wine. So it's a very nice introduction for Volnay. To Volnay, of course.
Thank you.
I always love to drink it even before the Volnay Village. It's always the one that is more approachable at almost any stage. The mix between or the way it's been done is very soft, and it's always a great presentation for the Domaine wines, which usually they are all have this kind of something which is hedonistic and approachable, but still firm, structured, and each terroir is really, we will see today, for me it's always the show of amazing how the terroir express, because the use of, it will be great that you tell us a bit about how you do such a tasty wines. They are so great. There are few wines in the world which are, you don't need to have the mood for. And for me, your wines are the wines I don't need to have the mood for. They fit always in. They are always so elegant from one side, but still have all the complexity from the other side.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's very nice to hear all this. I don't know that I deserve such compliments, but I will take them nonetheless.
Take them.
So we are now going into 5 different Volnay Premier Crus, each of them having a name. Just to remind people about this philosophy of Burgundy, perhaps most of you know, but Burgundy is the worldwide model for terroir-based viticulture. It sounds like a mouthful of jargon, but what it means is that Burgundy is the place where is the viticulture where the winemaker tries to identify the wine by the place where the grapes are grown, and to do this in the most precise and minute way. And so here, Daniel has shown you 5 different Volnay Premier Crus. They're all within 10 minutes walk from my winery, from where I'm sitting now. So it's a very tiny village. And all the terroirs are very close to one another, but you will see as we go through them that they taste significantly different, in spite of the fact that the same guy, me, has made the wines in the same way. You know, there's no significant difference in the way those 5 wines have been made, even 6, including the one we just tasted. They're all made the same way, yet they show the place where they are grown. The terroir speaks, and my role is to be like a midwife. My wines need to be born. I just help the birth, I help the education, but the wine has its personality and it comes out. So the first one we're tasting after.
Then we come, Guillaume, and do it a second round of the same thing. Let you bring the wines, and in the end, to the customer in the end who drink it. You know, the in-between ones, the second one. That I always say. My job is to do that, to let you do your best work and let the client do their best work so they can have the funds to pay for the wines.
Yeah.
As well. But so we can have the Clos de Duc, Clos des Angles, sorry.
Clos des Angles.
So the Clos des Angles also, in the last time when I visited, before that time, when during the COVID time, when there was the Carrefour and everything, I was visiting with Francois the vineyard, and the Clos des Angles is very special and different from the Volnay Premier Cru Les Angles.
Yeah, so Clos des Angles is at the bottom of the hill. It's really at the beginning of the hillside, and therefore it's not very slopey. And as you can expect from a wine that is not slopey, and it is also at the bottom of the hill, it means that the soil has come down from the hillside into that particular place. So that the soil is quite deep in that particular appellation. And it has, that's where it is. It's surrounded by a blue circle here. That's this triangle there. And it has received the soil from the places above it on the hill, so that the soil is quite deep. And when the soil is deep, the vines work less in order to produce grapes. They don't have to work so hard to find food and to find water to grow, and therefore they're a little bit more lazy, and that means the wines will be more delicate. And you will see this wine is quite a delicate wine. It's also very much in the style of Volnay. It's a very thin structure, not very structured, not very muscular, but very defined, very precise wine.
Yeah. And it always have this kind of nice silkiness without the tannin structure, as you say, but with the silkiness and bringing a bit of this kind of, you feel it's more warm, kind of, you know.
It's more
round, but still very floral.
Yeah, floral and quite salty. I think on the finish, you still get that saltiness. I think we're getting to Pomar already, and you feel a little bit of that saltiness on the tongue. But again, a lot of softness and smooth, quite smooth.
And how was the 2018s, which we didn't speak about? We'll taste everything from that vintage, so it's a good, you know.
Yeah, so 2018, in a nutshell, a very warm vintage. You know, it started actually with a very wet and dry and very wet and cold winter between 17 and 18. But then the season started quite brutally in April, if I remember correctly. In April, all of a sudden the weather changed. We got summer-like temperatures, very high temperatures for the month of April, in the high 20s. And then all of a sudden the plant reacted to that change in weather and was quite quick to catch up after the slow start. And you know, the months of May and June were quite uneventful. The flowering took place very nicely, and things progressed quite nicely, but there was very high temperatures and also a deficit of rainfall this year in 2018, like we've seen several times. In fact, we've seen in 19 the same, and we had seen that before in 15, for example. You know, much drier vintages than usual, and also more sun hours than usual. But the plant actually was able to resist against the heat, against the low rainfall, against the drought. And I think the wines we taste, they don't really show the character of a solar vintage as we used to know them. In other words, the wines are, yes, they are concentrated, but they are still quite fluid and fresh, which is very important. But it's another vintage where we started the harvest very early because we started on the 1st of September. Normally, you know, when I was a child, we never started before the end of September, around the 20th of September. But since I took over the estate, I've made probably the 10 most precocious vintages ever made in the history of the domain since the beginning of the 20th century. So there is a climate change in there someplace. But the plant seems to be adjusting reasonably well to the new circumstances. So that's good news. That's good news.
For me as well, when I tasted the 18th, it was a big surprise for me to see what came in the bottle, because the barrels were much bigger, much heavier, and until the end of the vinification, the end of the élevage, when I tasted the bottles, they came much fresher. And even reading, Ellen Meadows wrote even that he was really surprised as well from what happened after in the battles, giving it the highest ranks. But it was amazing to see how 2018 became vintage, showing the terroir amazingly.
Yeah, I often say this. It's a little bit like a joke, but I mean it in a very specific way. The guy who invented the barrel, the Burgundy barrel of 220 liters, this guy should have a statue made for him, because, the ability of élevage to actually rub out the most undesirable sides of the wine is really amazing. The first time I really thought about this was when we saw vintage 8 and vintage 9, 2008, 2009. 8 was a very meager, narrow kind of vintage, light, narrow, not much body. On the other side, 09 was a huge vintage, a little bit like 18 that we're tasting now. And the élevage made the 08s actually get some body, get flesh, whereas the 09s were refined during the élevage. So the same instrument, the barrel, is able to produce flesh for a vintage that needs it, and to reduce a vintage that is perhaps a little too exuberant at the beginning. So it's a genius that invented that instrument, is what I'm saying.
It's really magical moment. Yeah, it's so magical, this thing. Same, sometimes I say it's like, when we have too cold fluid or too hot, we do the same thing to get to the same point. And in the barrel, it's
exactly
to see that.
That's right.
So, so 2018, then what was the earliest vintage until now? 2020 was the earliest?
Yeah. 2020, the harvest was started on the 19th of August. That's the historical record. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
And we are also very happy, to say now that it's our first domain to do full tasting of the historical domain now, and the Jura project of the Pelican.
Oh yeah, in the same year.
In the same year, we had Francois, and now we have you, and both are such a well-known here. For Pelican, we are since 14, since the first vintage. Yeah. Francois didn't believe me in the last time. I told him, yes. You told me you want to taste it? I told him, yes, of course. It's great. So it's also such a nice thing to have you, which everyone know and everyone are familiar very much with both of the wines. And it's also a project that you took, and maybe it's nice that you tell us a few words about Pelican, because in the end you took a special place, which for us, it's like it was built in, and the wines are really, there is not like you do wine somewhere in the south, do a kind of a project, or, I'm not saying it's great as well, but something that is very in your character.
Yeah, this thing, it started because I wanted to do something outside of my comfort zone. It's perhaps a little bit silly, perhaps a bit of an ego trip. I wanted to prove to myself that I could start something from zero, without having inherited it, without having inherited the reputation that, like I have here in Volnay, where the reputation of the estate was made before I arrived. Then I looked at other areas where I could do something interesting, make a difference, do something interesting, and also not lie when I would say that I would make the wines. And so it had to be close from Burgundy because I wanted absolutely to be able to control what was going on in this estate. So I was looking at something which would be maybe less than an hour and a half drive from Volnay, but significantly different in terms of the style of the wines or the ability to do different things. And of course, Jura was great from that standpoint because it's a place where there are 5 different grapes as opposed to 2 here in Burgundy. And you can do blends. We don't do blends in Burgundy. You can do oxidative wines. We don't do oxidative wines in Burgundy. I even tried now to make a bubbly, a sparkling wine over there, which I would never do.
It's wonderful.
It's great.
We love it.
Really, really great.
So it's a place where, as we say, the sky is the limit. We can be imaginative with all those different grapes. And it's great fun. And it's a very genuine region as well. It has a long history of winemaking. It's a tiny, tiny region, but it has a long history of winemaking and a great reputation historically in France. But most of the wines have been generally consumed locally, and therefore it's not a very well-known region outside of France for that reason.
And let's go back to Volnay.
So we're on the
Volnay Fremier.
Volnay Fremier, yeah.
Which is a little bit outside there, I think, of the total tasting with the very Pommard expressions.
Yeah, if you look at the map again here, you will see that Fremier is just above the previous wine in terms of physical location.
Yeah, we just show them the label. We show everyone the label that they see, and we move to the map. Yeah,
and so you will see that on the map. You will see that Clos des Angles is just below Fremier. Fremier has given its soil downhill, has lost some of its soil downhill because the high point is to the left of the circle that's just been made now. The high point of the hill is above that to the left, and it's a little bit higher up than where the arrow is at the moment. But so imagine that the slope is such that the soil has gone down towards Clos des Angles, and therefore what remains in Fremier is quite shallow, maybe 50 centimeters of soil before we reach the rock. And so the vines, the roots, have to go through the rock in order to find food and water. And, this is the minerality, the famous minerality we talk about a lot in Burgundy, which reflects the fact that 180 million years ago, there was a big ocean over Burgundy, which disappeared about 60 million years ago, but left, mineral things behind. And that's the minerality that we find in this wine, expressed at the back of the mouth, also quite a saline finish. So it's
the aroma already, the smell of this minerality, the black fruit coolness in the aroma is unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is. I feel like you jumped a little bit to more mineral terroir, and it really shows in the palate, I think, in the acidity, in the finish, and the structure.
Yeah.
Always has very good texture for Fremier. Like it's a little bit more serious than Taipei and Champagne, Clos de Duc, which is very ethereal, but it always has a lot of freshness at the back.
Yeah.
And the structure of the tannins is different.
Mm-hmm.
We feel the tannins going from the back to the front, changing, and like you said, the wine goes back deeper and deeper. All the time when it's in the mouth, it's going deeper and deeper and deeper to the back of the tongue to show the spots of the minerality. and giving the saliva the nice move inside, and it's even make you a bit more hungry. It's the wine gives a bit more gastronomic way.
Hungry with an H, no, not angry with an A, right?
Absolutely. There is no anger in your wines.
No.
They are all, you know, they are so elegant without any anger. And it's not easy. Sometimes very elegant come with a lot of anger.
Yeah.
And so those, you know, we taste maybe 90% of the wines we drink on blind. When we go to dinner, we bring the wines on blind. Then one of the guesses we have a lot is it's Côte de Nuit or Angerville. Bon Romanée or Angerville. It's the only expression which is so delicate, which I think comes first of all from the start of you working in the vineyards already. When the harvest is finished, you are almost again in the vineyard for the soil, keeping such an amazing coolness and energy in the Côte de Beaune. Mm-hmm. And from this such an amazing touch, even with the barrel, which use about 20% in overall.
Not even 20% now. It's closer to 15 now.
Wow! And all the barrels come from Taranso.
The new barrels come from Taranso. Yeah, you would. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now you see, you really in Framier have this kind of a little bit more black one, and the first one you would say, okay, let's let it rest a little bit in the cellar.
Yeah.
Although it's really fresh and nicely drinking, you know, it's really every time.
It's very, very
to see
open,
that.
Yeah. You know, one thing I should say, perhaps, Daniel, is that my viticulture is biodynamic. So it's, of course, biodynamic is a subset of organic. So organic farming. I decided to convert the estate to biodynamic in 2005. That's when I hired Francois. I hired him with the mission to convert the estate to biodynamic treatments, so that there has been no entrance inside the wines for the last 15 years now. That's absolutely zero. And of course, on top of that, we use specific biodynamic preparations, which are made of natural products of various sorts, to help the vineyard stay healthy. The idea being that instead of curing a disease, you're better off giving the vineyard the necessary strength not to fall ill. And with that, what we try to do is to rejuvenate and increase the organic life in the soil, so that the soil is decompacted, the soil is friable, there are more things in it of various sorts that give the vineyard food. And we use also silica to increase the ability of the vineyard to capture energy from the sun, things like that. All of that has made a huge difference to the wines, I believe. Initially, I made this move because I wanted to protect my soil. I thought about it when Daniel talked about taking care of the soil, because you know the soil is the wealth here in Burgundy. Your patrimony is the soil, of course. So putting chemicals inside those soils was really silly, because it was in a way destroying part of your capital. So I wanted to avoid that, but very quickly I realized that the secondary effects on the wine were more important, in fact, than just protecting my soil, because the wines have gained in completeness, in harmony, in balance overall. Also in energy, I would say. The wines that we produce, we try to make, they are never really tiring wines. They are wines that give you energy, and they are asking for another glass. It's not something that tires you after the first glass. In fact, it invites you to try it again. So that's the idea. I've always been a believer that the wines we make are made to be drunk, not to be admired as a bottle in the cellar, you know.
And to be drunk a lot. It's so easy, and you never get tired when you have a bottle of Angerville. Really,
Yeah.
it's one of the things that you always have this kind of freshness. That's why I used, you know, in the past to say, you know, one of the best bottles of Angerville I had at 11 o'clock in the morning, you know, it was so fresh. Still, almost you can eat it with the breakfast, and it's amazing with all the complexity and still giving you so much energy, which that is what is amazing for those wines. So I think now we can also move toward the other part, kind of other part of Volnay, which for you, I made the order which usually you do for the domain with the Taipier, Champagne, Clos de Duc.
Yeah.
It's the good way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can move on for the Taipier, and which is a very famous vineyard, and everybody are surely more familiar with that than Clos des Angles, Fremier, and that are always unbelievable for the earliest drink. For me, even Fremier, even now still you have so much on the palate, so much, and the tannin stayed only down on the down part in such a smooth way, because it's not already silky for me, the Fremier, because it have this kind of coolness, black fruit minerality, but they are so smooth. Then you can tell
so
us.
Taipier is a little bit of a special terroir. It's quite high on the hill. The altitude of Taipier is maybe 310, 330 meters above sea level, which may sound very low, but for Burgundy standards, it's not that low. It sits on the south hill of the village. You know, that's it, yeah. As often in Burgundy, villages sit in between two hills. So there's one hill to the south and one hill to the north. Taipier is on the south hill, facing plain east, quite high on the hill, very slopey, and beautiful view there. You can see all the plain de la Saône, the Saône Valley, the Saône River Valley, and then further to the east, the beginning of Jura, and then the Alps. And on beautiful days, beautiful clear days, we can see the Mont Blanc quite clearly, the mountain. It's a beautiful terroir, also because of that. It sits there high on the hill, quite open to the wind. The wine you will see tastes quite cool because of that. There is an element of coolness in the wines, just even physically cool before being cool in other ways. But it's, generally speaking, it's the most reserved wine in my range, perhaps also the most masculine wine in the range, but always a lot of breed in this wine. This wine seems to be telling you you need to work a little harder to understand it. It wants to keep its integrity, to keep its confidentiality. So that's the way to describe it. Generally speaking, dark fruit on the nose, more than red fruit. It's more like blackberries, blueberries than.
It's almost the one that is like almost like a blue fruit and a lot of like liquid metal inside it. It's like and the nose, the aroma is very complex. The first sip is huge on the mouth, and then it's almost going like nothing inside, but filling you with a lot of complexity.
Very mouthfeel. For me, the wine has a lot of mouthfeel, but again, the coolness and it's very, very long, and you really feel the coolness on the palate. And you talked about the slope, and I think the acidity here is maybe higher than the
spices. A lot of spices as well coming inside. It's a very this one are really shooting us toward the Côte de Nuit sometimes, what we get there.
Yeah, definitely. It's really, really intense. So.
Yeah, and there's, you know, the origin of the word taille, for what it's worth, it means cut feet in French. And the origin comes apparently from the fact that people used to ruin their shoes when they were working in the vineyard because it is so stony that, you know, the shoes would be damaged by just walking on those rocks. So very stony. And the first 30 centimeters of soil is really quite limestone, relatively white soil, and then below is clay. It's a good mixture.
And it's amazing. It's really it has this nice move inside, so broad shoulder in the start of the palate. The mid palate is going like a train, like a very fast train inside, and then it's coming again. This huge mouth feeling and complexity staying all over your palate. Like you said, it's very shy from one side, but very complex and strong in the other side.
And generally speaking, this wine has a very long aging ability to age very long and to remain in top form for a long, long time. It's usually a bit more reserved in the early years and then lasts forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And in terms of, hey, it's amazing. It's so difficult to age your wines, really. It's one of the most difficult things because
we talked about the demand. Yeah. The demand is
the demand,
is
and then
everybody wants the wine.
Keeping.
And then you get some bottles.
All the clients here. My aim is that they will keep the bottles and then they will tell me, come, you know, because it's so difficult for me to do that. But so, and one more nice thing we have on your label. In the symbol is written on one way Volnay, and on the regular label saying, you know, the Volnay, each parcel is different. Is it?
Yeah. If you can show the label, can you show the label on the screen? I will explain to you. You know, I need to go back to the importance of my grandfather here. My grandfather inherited this estate at the age of 33, but prior to running the estate, he was an artist. He went to the fine art school in Paris, and he was an engraver. Not very well known, not making a real good living on it, but he was an engraver. He was quite a talented artist. And one of the first things he did was to design the label. And the label that you see today was designed by him more than 100 years ago, if you can believe this. Nothing has changed in this label. The white background is the white background that my grandfather wanted. The font is the same. The font was designed by my grandfather, used by him 120 years ago. And the way that this red circle at the top right-hand corner is designed, he designed this. It makes this label so recognizable always. And he wanted that circle. He wanted to put the family arms inside. You see, there's the crown of the Marquis, and then there's the symbol of the leopard inside. And this is the arms, the crest of my family. But then he wanted to fill the outside, and he liked the idea of the rhythm, and he decided to use the old spelling of the village's name. Volnay used to be spelled LLE until the 19th century. And then it was shortened to VOLNAY. But for many generations and many centuries, in fact, it was spelled that way. And he wanted to show the mutual respect of Angerville for Volnay and Volnay for Angerville. The family and the village are closely linked together. we've always wanted to be linked together. And today, I always try to promote my village before I promote my own wines. Perhaps tonight is not the best example of that, but that's because the exercise is. But you know, we've always felt very strongly that the village of Volnay is linked to us and vice versa. And in fact, when I try to acquire more land, I focus on Volnay still today because I like this idea, which I said before, which I can walk to all of my vineyards in less than 15 minutes. And that's a huge luxury, huge luxury. So that's the story on the label.
That's an amazing story. And yes, thinking about it, yeah, all the labels of Angeville I ever saw look the same. Huh?
The same, huh?
The only thing is that, you know, the only thing is that in the recent years, when people have too much cameras for the Instagram, they have a little bit of problem to catch the label and the vintage.
Yeah,
so, like you always need to turn a little bit the bottle of the Angeville to catch both, huh? But we have a question from a privately question.
Yeah.
What are the characteristics of the grape/wine making the wine suitable for aging?
There's not much man can do to make the wine, to give the wine more aging potential. Aging potential is a weird thing because normally the conventional wisdom is to say that in order for the wines to have aging potential, they need acidity and they need tannins. But there are some great counterexamples. For example, some of the best post-war vintages in Burgundy are 47 and 59, 47 and 59, and both those vintages had low acidity, and yet they are remarkably fresh still today. You know, when 2003 was born, which was my first vintage, a few weeks after my father passed away, I did the vintage as 03, and it was a low acidity vintage. It was a very solar vintage. And everybody said, that's not going to last. And of course, it will last. In fact, in the end, it will last a long, long time. It will be very similar to 47 or 59. You know, a very solar vintage with low acidity, but the acidity is the lack of acidity is compensated by the tannic structure, which is well in place and gives the wine the potential to age. So to summarize, not much comes from man in order to make the wine more, give the wine more aging potential, but it's also quite difficult for man to say today how long the wine will age, because wine, of course, is a living thing. It moves all the time, it changes all the time. You never taste it exactly the same way twice in a row. And that's one of the beauties, of course, one of the charms of winemaking and wine drinking. So as the wine evolves, we see that it might age more or less than we had initially expected. And sometimes the closed period lasts a lot longer than we would have liked. And then it becomes a fantastic wine, but 30 years on. 76 is a good example of that. You know, we've been waiting for a long, long time before the wine finally opened, but it did, you know, it did 30 years later. It took 30 years for 76 to open. At the other end, the recent vintages have never really closed, and they've become drinkable much earlier than 10 years ago.
That moves us great to the next question here. That this simple sentence you said, that's why I'm sorry to stop you, but the question was, does the 2018 vintage is more approachable than another vintages? What do you have to say about the critics that recommend a drinking window between 2023 to 2055?
You know, the wider the window, the less chances there are that they are wrong. But you know, to the point made in the question, It is, and Daniel, you can confirm that because you know the recent vintages, but very few, none of the recent vintages, in fact, have really closed. They've become approachable earlier than in the previous generation and even 10 years or 15 years ago. I think biodynamic has something to do with this, that the wines are more approachable earlier. And at the other end, I have to say that I don't yet have the historical evidence as to how long they age. Like I said, I converted the estate in 2006 to biodynamic. So we have 15 years, but 15 years is not so long in the life of a wine. I will say that 18 is a vintage that I think will age for a long, long time. You know, the window starting in 23 makes, I think, some sense. It would be, I think, except for an exercise like this, it's probably better to wait another couple of years before drinking this wine and having it with food and everything else. But then, you know, it will certainly continue to improve for probably 12, 15 years. And then there will be a long, long plateau before the wine starts to deteriorate and become less interesting. So, of course, also there was another conventional wisdom, which was to say that Burgundy wines did not age as long as other regions. But that's no longer true. I mean, that's not at all true, in fact. The fact is, currently, the taste of consumers is for younger wines. There's no question. People around me, I see that, and I see the young generation, they have a preference for quote unquote on the fruit wines as opposed to secondary or tertiary aromas.
Yeah. So we can move on to speak a little bit about champagne and having it in our glasses, I think.
Okay.
And another thing, well, like you said, you know, the global warming, maybe, I'm not sure, you know, maybe if it did more good, more bad for the vineyard, more solar vintages, better and better wines coming out. But in terms of keeping the wine, you have bigger problem, you know, the climate is hotter. Less people have place to store the wines and age them for so much. Then that point gives also kind of a point for people that drink the wines earlier, basically because they don't have another way to put them in the cellars. We go up and not down, you know, more higher building, more people, less place to really store the wines unless you can store them in some big places, which not every country have and not everyone have that opportunity.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I prefer the wines to be drunk too early than being damaged by bad storage, of course. Of course. Absolutely. So Volnay-Champagne is, this is my largest holding. It's in two separate pieces, but it totals about 4 hectares. The two pots together. These are the two right there. They are parallel. They are very close to one another. Maybe 100 meters between the two, and they are very long rows. The rows follow the hillside. They go up the hill like this, and the bottom of the hill, the bottom of the rows is at the bottom of the hill, and the top of the rows is over mid-hill, about 300 meters long. Yeah, so it's a beautiful terroir. It's facing east. The soil, like I said, maybe I did not say it yet, the soil is more brown, a higher level of ferrous oxides and clay. But this champagne always has this ability to be soft and smooth and silky. The tannins are always completely integrated. There's no angle in this wine. Yeah, that's why I keep saying, firstly, I say 2 things about this wine. I say, this is perhaps the most perfect example of what you should expect from a Volnay Premier Cru, because it has all the ingredients that we expect. You know, it's a feminine wine. It's a silky, velvety wine, has a beautiful structure, very balanced, very expressive also. So in many ways, the archetype of Volnay, Premier Cru, yeah.
And it's like a big mix of a lot of things, but and for me, what is really another spotlight coming in Champagne is the spices.
Mm-hmm. It's
Always
spicy.
have for me a bit more spices, reminding me a lot the spices in usually you have in the side of Vin Romanée, not in Flagey, more like this kind of spices you have, you know. In the same part is for if you have in Taipei the more mineral part, the more blueberry, the more this kind of with the masculine. Here you have the more spices notes coming out in Champagne for me.
Yeah, the fruit is quite a mix of black and red fruits, and I agree. You get a little bit more spices on the palate than, say, the florality of Taipei or Clos des Angles, which is, of course, different side of Volnay. But it really feels like all the range that we tasted until now was just in perfect balance, and I think this is a good indication for a wine that can age for a long time, because I think all of us, when we want to open a bottle, we want to feel, of course, balance, freshness, good taste. But if the wine will keep that for his entire life, or for most of his life, for me, this is an unbelievable wine. It's an amazing wine. So, yeah, this is in terms of all the aging talking.
So, just to say that Champagne overall, the size of Champagne overall is about 11 hectares. I own 4 hectares of those 11, and the other 7 hectares are split between maybe 8 or 10 different wine growers. So I am by far the largest holder of the Champagne appellation, but I am not the only one. Yeah, nice nose. See, 18 is quite a lively, almost exuberant vintage. You know, there's a lot of fruit in this vintage, and like we said earlier, the élevage has contributed to refine the wines, and they look good now. They will gradually, but slowly, in the bottle, they will refine themselves even more, and the balance between the fruit and other things will come out as time goes by. But of course, when we taste them today, they taste extremely approachable, like we said earlier. So it's difficult, of course, to have the patience to wait when you have the pleasure you can get early. So it's always a trade-off. Yeah. So that's the most feminine example in the range, for sure.
Yeah, with Champagne, it's like you said, it's more complete wine. It goes all over your palate. It's coming inside. You don't feel it at any area. You feel it in all the areas, from start to the mid palate to the end. It's amazing how it comes.
Yeah, harmonious.
So we have a question. Is there a notable clone of Pinot grown at one of your plots? How does it differs from classical Pinot? Behavior in the vineyard, berry size, mouthfeel.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Is there a notable clone or clones of Pinot grown at one of your plots? How does it differs from classical Pinot?
Yeah, I'm assuming the question makes a reference to a Pinot called Pinot d'Angerville. My grandfather and my father in the 1950s decided to try and identify vines that were producing what they considered as being the best possible Pinots. And they made some what we call massal selection in the Taipei area. And this became, and finally over several years, they identified the best ones. And finally, a new clone was created called Pinot d'Angerville. It's still kept in a nursery in Beaune under this name, Pinot d'Angerville. It's not often used anymore, not often replicated, but it exists and is conserved as such. And the general characteristics that my father and grandfather wanted was low producing vines, not huge yields, low producing, with tiny berries, small berries, like a milrandage, as we call in Burgundy. So relatively small berries, but very distinguished wines, producing a very distinguished wine generally. So fine, authentic Burgundy wine. That was the Pinot d'Angerville. Yeah. And today, after the 50s, in the 70s and 80s, my father used clones when he had to make replantations. So he bought several different types of clones, but he used clones that he bought directly from the nurseries. But today, I have gone back to Massal selection, and all my new plantations are made from woods that have been selected within the estate. And then reproduced, of course, in the nursery, because at the end of the day, they become a clone themselves. We have to reproduce them to produce the several thousand vines that we need to replant. But they come from our own vineyards, and we continuously we identify the best vines and locate them, mark them so that we recognize them, and we use them to replant when we need to replant.
Nice question, great answer for that, and wonderful to have more knowledge about that and seeing another secret for the Angerville wines. And so we can pass on back to the northern part.
To the back garden, actually,
yeah, to
of
the
the
garden,
domain.
the one you don't need to walk even 10 minutes or any minute or
you
a
can
second.
Just ask to carry you there.
Go outside and you are there. The one that you have everything to tell us about, maybe the most special monopole exists in the Côte de Beaune.
Yes, this, like you said, Daniel, this vineyard starts just behind the house. It's the back garden, but it's planted. It's been planted that way for several centuries, of course. There are many characteristics of this terroir that make it quite special. One of them being, perhaps the most notable of them being, that it has a double slope, so that it faces east as much as it faces south. So the high point, if you will, is on the top right-hand corner, and the low point is on the bottom left-hand corner, so that the first ray of sun actually hits the vines immediately. There is quite a deep slope, a steep slope in both directions, which makes it also interesting. And there is a good level of soil before the mother rock, perhaps 1 meter of soil, and it's made almost entirely of white marls, marne blanche, white marls, with a high limestone content. So very white soil with a lot of limestone in it. It's a beautiful terroir, very nicely located, like I said. No excess water on the surface ever because of the steep slopes. The excess water is immediately washed out, but there are underground springs in this particular area, so that even in the dry years, there is never any hydric stress in this particular terroir. In fact, if we look at the yields in Clos-des-Ducs versus the other Premier Crus of Volnay from the estate, in the recent very dry and hot vintages, the yield of Clos-des-Ducs has always been higher than in the other terroirs because of the presence of those underground springs. So Here the photo does not really, it's taken from too close to show that there is that slopiness both sides, but there's a slopiness from the top, from right to left, and also from the top of the picture to the bottom of the picture. That's
show you now. We put another one that they can see from the
top.
upper side, from the top, to see a little bit how it goes to the side.
So it's
exactly. So this picture is taken from the top corner, the high point, and it slopes towards the village and towards the right as well. That's right. And my house is there in the middle, the white block there. That's where I'm talking to you from.
Now you will show it. Well.
So this wine, of course, we reach a different level from the previous wines. And how is that different level expressed? Well, I would say, if I had to use one word, I would say even more complexity. Even more complexity, different sensations. In French, in Burgundy, we have this word, we call it millefeuille, 1,000 layers. 1,000 different sensations coming one after the other. And there can be very diverse types of sensations, and yet they jive together very, very well. There is mint in that wine, there is chocolate in that wine, there is a little bit of other vegetables in that wine. There's flowers in that wine. Cinnamon I smell also in there. And all those different aromas jive together, and to give something which makes your tasting buds very active, because it's the fear of missing out. The famous FOMO. That the tasting buds, they have this feeling. They want to get everything. And so you get that sensation on your cheeks, inside cheeks, that the tasting buds are trying to grasp every different tasting.
It's changing the temperatures of your face. It smells like Monfortino and tastes like Musini.
Could be worse.
Yeah.
So, what makes Clos-des-Ducs apart, of course, is all what I said, but also this ability in whatever vintage to be above the rest. Even in difficult periods, in difficult vintages, as in great vintages, Clos-des-Ducs will always be markedly more interesting, more personality, more complexity than the other wines of the range. Many people have argued that it could warrant a Grand Cru status. I have often said that I don't care about that at all, but I'm pleased to see that the market recognizes that this wine is above a quote-unquote normal Premier Cru of Côte de Beaune. It's something different. I will say immediately that I have very little to do with this. I do my best, but it all comes from the quality of the terroir.
And when you are there and when you see it and you feel it and everything is always there, and it in Burgundy, it's the same like Clos-des-Ducs for me. It's the same like Clos Saint-Jacques, like Parentout, like Amoureuse. It's more special by being such a wonderful Premier Cru, going inside of those really, really special terroirs that the Grand Cru give it a lot of specialty for me. And
has a lot of essence, and
it's always huge pleasure to have, the Clos-des-Ducs, and have here, 18, not like having the 2020, 19, having it a little bit more and let it, really express all what is inside it. And it's really such a special aromas with all those dry rose petals, and the rust you have inside. It has all the special thing of this highly mineral terroirs with a lot of complexity, and the mouth feeling is so lean and so complex. It's almost like
complex,
I said,
exactly. And
what you want, what Burgundy is huge, is saying it's all the power with zero mass.
Yeah.
And Claude Leduc is really the expression of all the power with zero mass. And wow, you know, thank you so much also for being here with us for such a wonderful tasting. I really hope the next time we will do it, you know, on the table, feeling a little bit how the wine age, doing some kind of special things like you like to do in many other places. And this wine is always giving you so much power, you know, it's like, let's go to drink. We are ready.
Let's start the next tasting. It's really a wine that you finish and you feel like you have
until now we taste, you know, and now the Claude Leduc makes you want to drink, you know, until now we were in it.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit of it, and saying now we are ready for dinner and we are ready to go to drink, and we are ready for everything. And you know, it's such a special moment to have you, really. I'm so grateful. I had starting the work with you was such a special thing for me, because it was not possible for me to get an appointment in the Domaine.
Okay.
So I had to buy wines in London. So through them, I could have a visit at the Domaine. And of course, I come for the first time, you know, as a client. I come, I taste the wine, I thank a lot. And then it was on May 2012. And then like after, I think in October, I said, yeah, I visited the domains already, you know, and maybe I can come again and start. And then saying, you know, so it was really, I think for me, it was my first great estate to have, great estate to believe in being in Israel and finding Israel an interesting market, and believe in me personally as someone that can really be an ambassador for you know, such a long heritage, you know, so I really appreciate that, and thank you very much for that again, and it's always such a great pleasure.
But, you know, Daniel, I will say 2 words about that because it's important, perhaps for your audience as well. You know, as you grow old, you want to focus doing business with people you like. You know, you want to get rid of all the people that are annoying people and make your life miserable. So you concentrate. I do, in fact, I don't know if everybody does, but I do. I concentrate on what is my feeling with this guy. And I will say quite simply to you, the first time I met you, I remember that tasting very, very clearly. I remember in the cellar, everything, your first time. And I had that good feeling with you because I've said that to you several times. We are partners. And you said that earlier. I make the wine, but you are the ambassador for the wines. Without you, my wines would never reach Israel. And they would never be shared by the people that are tonight with us on this Zoom tasting. And for me, it's very important. You know, I would like even to say, if I could, my wish would be to personally know every person that consumes my wines worldwide. Of course, it's an impossible mission, but it's important. You know, Burgundy is also about conviviality, about sharing, about knowing the people that you drink wine with. And it's a very important point. And the reason why today we are together in this relationship is because you and I had a good fit in the first time we met, and because you and I believe in long-term, loyal relationships. And that to me is the key to you know, an easy relationship, an easy sharing of the responsibilities for the better for all of us. So it's a win-win situation. That's what I wanted to say. A little bit emotional, but I mean every word of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, it's really exciting for me to hear, and wine is an emotional thing, and it's always nice also to express our emotions beyond the terroirs and the work and everything. And I'm so happy, really, we can really celebrate a decade in the next vintage. It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Having you here. Thank you so much, Guillaume. I think all the clients were grateful to hear you. It's very nice that they could ask some questions as well and participate in it and have your wines like that. And it's such a special thing, these Zoom tastings, when we have so many people that can taste the wine. We work very hard to give them on the best shape at home. They are sitting on the sofas, concentrate on everything. And I think it was a huge lecture about Volnay and your
history
wines.
of the domain, and big pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you so much,
Guillaume.
I enjoyed it very much myself, and I thank you for taking the time, for the participants taking the time to follow the conference, and for you to have organized all this and make this possible. So thank you to everyone.
Great.
Thank you so much. It was really such a great pleasure, and we will have the next week another guy having a project, you know, in Burgundy with Jean-Marc Rouleau coming for tasting of Chakra wines, and so you know, we will have a transatlantic one, not 1 hour and a half drive like you have, and. Thank you so much, and it was such a pleasure to finish with the tasting of the Clos de Duc, which is always special, and all the rest of the range, from first to last. See this
different expressions,
fine-tuning of the terroir, and all these wines. I couldn't spit anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, Guillaume. Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye-bye.